Mate, you really need to up your BDM marketing game. I suffered a loss the first time I ran. So you just build up bit by bit a knowledge of all the different ways the firm runs. And then you realize once you're in the job, gosh, this is actually quite different. Rankings by total value of deals in
It's made my
24.
day that you've come with the table with you. I think
I've
that's
come with
just
some-
brilliant, right?
I'm a managing partner. I'm
Evidence-based
a managing partner.
lawyering is just next level.
I'm definitely not going to comment on that.
Hello and welcome everyone to the latest episode of But Is It Legal with me, your host, Simon Marshall. I am joined today by Paul Lewis, who is Global Managing Partner of Linklaters. I hope I've got the job title right.
Firmwide Managing Partner. But believe me, we can debate and discuss that one. Yeah,
there we go.
Firmwide Managing Partner.
Paul, I don't suppose you can give us a bit of a potted history of the career first. Start out there, tell people how you got to the role that you're in today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you I'll try and do it very quickly. So I hail from South Wales. So I come from a small village just outside Swansea. I completely lost the accent, much to my father's annoyance. But anyway, went to the local state school in Swansea. Through luck, I think probably luck more than anything else, I managed to then go to Oxford. Very, very lucky to go to Oxford. Life-changing experience coming from sort of reasonably, small village, relatively poor background compared to others, sort of going through comp, going to Oxford, change of world, etc. From there to Linklaters. Linklaters has been my career, barring one or two secondments, but I've been a Linklaters lifer. I qualified there into capital markets. I've done pretty much every type of finance you could possibly do over the years. I was always interested, as well as loving the work that I did, I was always interested in the management side and one of those sort of tinkering, curious type people of, right, how does this work? Can we make it better? How do we structure things? So I'd always sort of indicated that I was interested in that and picked up more roles as I went through. Before I did this particular role, I was the head of our finance division. So we have three divisions at Linklaters: finance, corporate, and litigation, arbitration, investigations. So three distinct. I was in charge of the finance division, and then 3.5 years ago, I took on this role at the same time as Adamar, my senior partner, took on hers. So 3.5 years of effectively our leadership duo, and it both feels like a long time and yesterday.
3.5 years in a lifetime. I got it right. Tell me a bit about in mid-career, were there things that you did before you took on the kind of practice head role in terms of managerial responsibilities, or things that you did earlier on? I'm really, those people who are listening in who think, well, I'm not going to make managing partner for a few years yet. What steps can they take now to start making moves towards that?
Yeah, Tillinghast has been really good to me in the sense of, every time I expressed an interest in something, the firm was very amenable to opening opportunities up. Now, there are opportunities you have to then go and take, but, if you sort of indicated that you were keen and interested, and I probably was always a little bit of the teenage scribbler, which is the famous description of Nigel Lawson when he was a young chancellor in the 80s. So I always probably was a little bit of the sort of, it's the sort of thing Paul likes. I did a master's in finance when I was a junior associate that Linklaters kindly paid for. So I was always interested in things sort of above and beyond just the pure legal piece. I think when I was a fairly junior partner, I'd only been a partner for a few years. We have a partnership board, so our governance structure, law firm, very convoluted, but we essentially have a partnership board, which is a group of partners who are voted in by their constituencies, so it represents the whole firm, chaired by the senior partner, and then the managing partner runs the exco. Effectively, the managing partner reports to the board and is appointed by the board. And so I put myself forward fairly early on for the board. I suffered a loss the first time I ran, which was a good moment. Those ones you learn more by a defeat than you do by a victory. So that was good, and a good friend of mine got the job, and I subsequently got on the next time round, and he was on there as well, and we worked very well together.
Right.
So I was on the board for 4 years, I think. I sort of headed my own group for a bit, and I sort of threw myself into all the things I was interested in knowledge and learning, interested in sort of, BD. And so I just threw myself into whichever roles I thought would be interesting and was available. So by the time I came up to that divisional piece, I'd done a lot of different things in the firm. I'd been our head of innovation for sort of 5 or 6 years. So I took on lots of different things, just sort of interested, curious, wanted to do it. And so you just build up bit by bit a knowledge of all the different ways the firm runs. Now, at the same time, you're doing your day job, you're doing all your sort of client-facing, chargeable, deal doing, etc. But you build up sort of a good knowledge of the firm and what it takes to run a firm. Although with that, I will say that, when you're not in the job, you always look at the people who are doing it and you think you've got a good idea of what it will be. And then you realize once you're in the job, gosh, this is actually quite different. When you're the one, Nate and myself as a duo will be this, when you're the one who has to make the decision, or everything effectively comes up to you, it's a very different place than when you're sort of one level down. So that
I
was
think
the
that's
eye
right.
opener.
I was sat in your reception the other day thinking of you. I was meeting a friend, and I was sat there, and I'd been in the building a few times over the career, and I looked up and down the reception, and I thought, this is a big place, and there were a lot of international people there, and I thought, I'm going to be interviewing the guy who's responsible for this, and I'll rush straight to a question I was going to ask you a bit later. But how does that weigh on you? Is it okay to have this, like, multi-billion kind of organization on your and Edamar's shoulders? Or how does it feel?
Gosh, when you say it like that, Simon. No, I mean, in the early days, I think you are very acutely aware of it,
Mm.
and then it sort of becomes the thing you do. And I suppose the reality is, I mean, you can do right, it's a 2.1 billion revenue organization, like say 21 countries, 30 offices, 3,500 lawyers, another 2,500 business teams members, etc. It's a big law firm and it's a big operation. And there's a lot of people that work in it whose careers will depend on, to some extent, your actions and decisions. So on the one hand, it's a huge responsibility. It's a huge privilege. I mean, a massive privilege to be effectively put in that position where you get to run such a fantastic organisation. But I have to say, it's a great moment where, as I've talked about the fact I'm Welsh, and I will be very stereotypically Welsh in the sense of I like all the things that Welsh people will like, one of which is rugby. We don't want to talk about that too much at the moment, given that we lost very heavily to England last weekend. But I was meeting sort of a friend of mine who's in the legal recruitment business, and he was introducing me to a former very famous Welsh rugby player who runs a business in Wales. And I was sort of in that starstruck type thing. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm Paul, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I sort of run a law firm." And he's like, "Oh, what sort of law firm is it? A small law firm, big law firm?" "Oh, a reasonably big law firm." And after this famous superstar rugby player went away, the legal recruiter turned around to me and went, "Mate, you really need to up your BDM marketing game. You're really not selling
There was a
selling the role you're
time.
doing very well."
There was a time 30 years ago, those internationals would have gone back to their desk as solicitors on the Monday, right? I mean,
That might have been
Bracken
England. That
and
might have been England.
yeah,
I
well,
think
there we
less
go.
so, less so Wales.
Maybe not so much the Welsh. I don't know, but thinking forward, then, lovely. Thanks for the positive career history. What's success going to look like in 2035? How do you envisage that for the firm? Maybe for you a bit as well.
Yeah, well, to be honest, for the firm, I think I'd probably be long gone from the firm by 2035. I think for the firm, for me, the defining feature is: are we going to be winning the mandates that a top tier firm like ours should be winning? And I'm sure we're going to explore any number of those different contexts, because I will spend a lot of time with different people, both internal and external, debating each aspect of, well, what does top tier mean? Is it Magic Circle? Is it Global Elite? Is it some other tag? What type of practice area do you in, etc. But to me, I think, people talk a lot about law firm profitability and measure success in terms of profitability.
Mm.
And profitability is obviously it's a business, right? Law firms are businesses. It's not a dirty word. The profitability matters. But I think what matters more at that very top end is, are you doing the very best work? Because lawyers are people who want to be challenged. They want to be doing the things that they came into the business to do, the deals that get on the front of the paper. The deals are the most complex, that give them intellectual stimulation, that give them sort of the idea that they're playing at that top level. They can be they can be the market leader with a team that is market leading. So to me, it's when you look at the stripe of deals globally that are the mega deals in the world, and whether that's deals or matters, and I'm a transaction lawyer, so I sometimes talk about deals when I should say matters, as my litigation colleagues tell me. But what are those very big ones, right? Those are the ones that we need to be getting more than our fair share of. So to me, that is success, right? It's when you look at the mega deals that are going on and the law firms that the very best, the very biggest clients in the world are looking for to help them on that. Are we the firm that does that? Because it's a virtuous circle then, because it's the work that's the most challenging for our people, tends to be the work that is the most profitable, because it's complex, because not everyone can do it, and because it's intense, right? It's intense. You do it to tight timeframes. Not everyone can do it for that reason as well. So to me, that's the measure of success. Now, if you get that right and your strategic focus around that right, the profitability should follow. But profitability also depends on where you are and where you play. And every firm is different. So if a firm has a much heavier footprint in the US, on average, they are going to be more profitable. They can distribute that in lots of different ways,
Yeah.
but that's just a function of the geographic footprint. It doesn't mean that everyone has to have the same geographic footprint. So to me, we need to be profitable enough to be able to have the right talent and recruit and retain the right talent, and for our people to feel fairly rewarded in the marketplace. But the really big thing, I think, is being at that sort of the top end of the matters that we do.
I wrote a blog post years ago about how I think that Links were always one of the firms that had a strong sense of who it is as a firm and was willing to make an audacious move first in the market. I remember in two previous economic cycles, you stopped doing work that was, under 100,000 euros or 70,000 pounds, and then there was the Kinstella kind of rollout, as it were,
Yeah.
as well, and the Hive off as well. And I'm intrigued by that. Does that feel like it still identifies the firm? Do you think like it's a firm that really understands its own destiny and understands it's going to strike out and make bold moves in the market?
I think I've got the benefit of having, well, back to that point of being a Linklaters lifer. So I've seen lots of different evolutions, or I suppose sort of, geological strata of Linklaters over the years. I think I'll talk about us, right? I think because I can only fairly talk about what Adam and I have done. In that, I think we came in or, with a sort of very clear agenda of what we thought we needed to do more of as a firm.
Right.
And I think we felt we came in sort of going, well, we think we need to change our compensation system. Famously, we were probably the last of the traditional Magic Circle firms with a very, very pure lockstep. We didn't think that it has served us very well, served us very well for a number of different reasons. We didn't think it worked in the modern world. And I think we have, and as you grow into the roles, you get ever more decisive. I think both of us are quite decisive personalities. So if I look at, I think probably the moment I look back on with a certain element of, and in the context, I sort of choose the word very carefully, but pride as to how we handled it was around Moscow. So Moscow and sort of Russia came up sort of fairly quickly in our and doing this job when we're sort of fairly new, and we were the first big law firm to close Moscow. And we went from essentially Adrian and I talking about it together with some of our Moscow colleagues on a Sunday afternoon to a partner vote on sort of the Thursday. We were in New York all week, actually, we were there for another reason. And then sort of, effectively coming out on a Friday. A partner vote in any law firm is not something that you go into lightly.
Yeah.
And the message we got back from the partnership, which we definitely abided by, was we understand for a range of reasons why this is the thing we should do, but you need to look after our people. And I think we made a very quick decision. We've still got 50 or so people from our Moscow office that are with us in various different parts of the world. We had all of our junior lawyers in Moscow got the chance to come to different parts of the world and requalify, many of whom have done that. We were very generous, especially on the non-lawyer side, on the sort of severance payments. And I think it was a good, quick decision. Turned out to be, and at the time, no one else was doing it. So there'll be a certain amount of, well, no other law firm has done this yet. Well, why don't we just wait and see? It's like, no, look, we should be willing to do that. So I think we've tried to inject a bit of that sort of, let's be willing to do it. And one of Adamar's catchphrases is bold and ambitious. That seems to resonate with people. So certainly that's the way you describe it is what we've been looking to do.
I like that. I think it does seem to set the tone for the market as well. I say Slaughters are probably in that, in their own kind of way as well. Very different market to yours nowadays. Maybe we move on to the Magic Circle. The ANO. I don't want you to get to talk about competitors too much, but I wonder whether the ANO Sherman merger has effectively redefined the Magic Circle. Has it changed? And is that phrase meaningful anymore as well? Do we use the phrase Magic Circle?
Yeah, so I get asked this question from time to time. I mean, I think I haven't got strong views either way in terms of the use of the term. I think each of the other firms that would classically be considered to be in there are all excellent firms and got
Yeah.
a huge amount of respect for them. And they are all, if you look at, notwithstanding slightly different directions for each of us, if you look at the geographic footprint and the practice footprint of all of us, there is a large identity there. In terms of, yes, there'll be differences between each of us, but when you look and sort of say, right, if you look and compare, pick your 30 or 40 most profitable law firms in the world, let's just do it as a starting point. If you sat down and you mapped across that geographic and practice footprint across all of those, then yes, the Magic Circle firms, as was with the exception of Slaughters, will have quite similar footprints. But ditto, there'll be other firms in there. So Hogan Lovells, DLA, there's Latham, 15 jurisdictions, but obviously with heavy predominance on the US. So there's other firms in there that would have a similar geographic footprint that I think are, when I look at sort of the industry, I will compare across those firms. And then clearly we're competing against firms with a very different geographic footprint. So firms that are predominantly based in the US that might be doing certain things outside. So, I don't think the Magic Circle is an unhelpful moniker. I think it might be right that it's becoming sort of less of an obvious delineation of those from others. But I suppose I just try and break down there, get behind the title and look at, okay, well, what are we doing where? It's interesting to see what other people are doing where, but you have to have your own views as to what works for us. And we're all different. I think that's the point. We're subtly different in terms of our strengths. And that means that what you need to do to win also should be different.
Have you got a defined, I'm not asking who's in it, but have you got a defined kind of competitor group that you think about when you're trying to take on that interesting work that you were talking about earlier? Do you think, well, these are the firms that we're most likely to be competing against for that?
So obviously giving away your trade secrets, I think you'd sort of given me a sight of the sort of questions you might ask, and I've seen that one, and sort of natural humbleness used to go. It's a question that can go terribly wrong, right? In the sense of you can name firms, and some people go, "Oh, yeah, that's so delusional. You're not in the same bracket," or you can name other firms, and yeah, anyway, it can go. So what I did was I quickly pulled off because I thought it was as good a measure as any. There was one of the M&A league tables from a month or two ago.
Right.
So this was last year's M&A rankings by total value of deals in
It's made my
24.
day that you've come with the table with you. I think that's just brilliant, right?
I'm a managing partner.
Evidence-based
I'm a managing partner.
lawyering is just next level, right?
Well, and no one can critique me for. There's no subjective judgment in here, right? So this is the top 20 firms by global M&A deal value last year, and I'll sort of show it to you across the table.
Right.
And so if you look at that top 10, you've got Kirkland, Latham, Skadden, Freshfields, Paul Weiss, Simpson, Wachtell, Cleary, us, Davis Polk. I think is that 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, and possibly Sullivan. My counting's going wrong. Then you've got another 10 really, really good firms in there as well. I mean, however you want to define it, I think that's a good way of looking at it. We are a small C corporate firm. We are a corporate and commercial firm. We are excellent in M&A and big ticket public M&A as a sort of absolutely defining feature of that. We're excellent in finance. We're excellent in litigation. But when you're looking at those big mandates, go back to that. Looking at big ticket public M&A, I think that's as good a measure of the firms that we will compete against and see as our natural competitors. Now, the geographic nexus of that will change, right? Clearly, the firms with a heavy US footprint will be winning more of that work in the US. That tends to be of bigger value. We will tend to win more of that maybe outside the US historically. So, how that's going to play out is going to be interesting for all of those firms. And that is sort of a key factor for all of us to consider. But yeah, that's what I will think of when I'm thinking about the competitor base.
Thanks for that. I think that's a really good insight as well, and some great names on that list, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to be, surrounded by Wachtell and Paul Weiss and the other firms that you've got on that list as well. Thinking a bit more back to, well, maybe you personally and also the firm as well, about this balancing of local and global. How do you make sure that you get it right, within the firm? And then also, I'd love to hear a bit about your commitment back to what you've been doing with business in the community and spending time back in. I'm right to think back in Wales.
Yeah, back in Wales.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how does Linklaters get local versus global balanced right?
So I think probably two quite, related, but I'll end up being quite different in terms of the responses. So I think for Linklaters, local and global, one of the things that we've been pushing and reasserting or reaffirming, I think it's back to that sort of, a clear recognition of what you are and why you are. We became a global law firm in essentially back end of the 90s, early noughties with various mergers. At the same time as, I suppose, CC would have been doing the same, or Freshfields, etc., and A&O. And we have been a global law firm since then. We came together to be a global law firm, and to my mind, we came together to be a global law firm to be able to do those sort of cross-border, cross-practice type mandates for the biggest, corporates, banks, funds, financial investors in the world. Right? That was why we came together as a firm. That's where we absolutely excel, because you've got a group of people who are very talented, who are used to working together on those types of deals across borders, across practices, and you can deliver to the client on that basis. Now, in any jurisdiction, there will be a range of work, right? So some of the work will fall in that category, and from my perspective, the more the better. But actually, there's a certain amount you need to do just to be very domestically relevant. At the other end of it, what we don't want to be domestic champions. We're not setting out to be the biggest law firm in Italy doing the widest range of work in Italy, and ditto, other jurisdictions. What we're trying to do is that stripe of work at the top. And the reason we are places is to help us do that. That's why we're global. And so one of the things we've been pushing is, we have a compensation system, certainly at partner level, which is, it's one profit pool globally. So we tend to think globally. And I've been pushing we don't have a Europe strategy and an Asia strategy and a US strategy that is different from the firm strategy. We have a firm strategy, and that's global. And then we have how are you going to deliver that in Europe and within Europe, in France, in Germany, in Italy? How are you going to do that in Asia, etc.? So we've been trying to make sure that we think global, and we have structures that, as far as possible, are global and go across borders rather than be local. So it's trying to be at the other end of we're not a federated law firm, where each jurisdiction just has to make sure they are profitable within the terms, and everyone does their own thing and chases their own clients and builds their own specialisms. It's like, no, this is what we do. We're a global, consistent whole, and we're driving towards that. Now, clearly within that, you're not going and defining what every office does on every single thing, but there's clear enough parameters of this is what we're aspiring to. This is what we would like you to maximize when we make partner investments. This is what we're going to prioritize. And we're pretty clear on that. And that means not doing other things. So here's where we're going towards. Here's the strategy. Let's all buy into that globally. So there's room for, local differentiation, absolutely, but not to a degree where you've basically got 20 different law firms doing their own thing.
It feels like something that there's a natural tension point around your and Idamar's desks to get that balance right. Is that a fair observation? To say that, that Italians want to be Italian, right? The French want to be French a bit as well. That's my experience of working in global law firms. So
I think the challenge for me in Ademar, which is the ask that people should have and do have of us, is can we articulate a compelling vision internally and externally, I suppose, as to why this global approach makes sense and how everyone fits within it and has a key role in it. If I can't explain to, and you can pick any jurisdiction, if I can't compellingly explain to our fantastic partners in Madrid why this global vision is the right vision and why they should calibrate their work towards that, which they do, and why it's right for them and the type of deals, the matters they want to do, then that's my failing. So I think you're right. There is always that. Let's face it. In any organization, there's always going to be. Life is never binary,
no.
so there's always going to be shades and spectrums of what people want to do. So really, you're sort of nudging people towards right, I want you to want to be in this global law firm and to try and do this work, etc. Now, luckily, I go back to what are your drivers of partners and lawyers generally? They want to be doing the biggest and the best mandates. So, having a global vision around that simple concept and the biggest and the best global deals tends to mean you're all pulling in the same direction. But yes, there will be a certain amount of tension, but that's not a bad thing, right? That's just okay, let's sort of find where the balancing point is.
Yeah, I'm always reminded. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I used to work at Pizza Hut before I came into the legal sector years ago as a man and boy through university. And somewhere in Canada, there's a guy who invented stuffed crust pizza because he was just a rule breaker. He noticed that all these people weren't eating the crust, so he'd stuff them with cheese and then they would eat them all. And
Excellent.
somebody in the regional office noticed, and they took it all the way to the top. And I think there are times that we need our mavericks and we need our kind of local thinking to influence what we're doing on a global scale. So I guess that's what I'm hinting at.
Yeah, and what can't I do, right? And what can't any leader, sort of who's not in the ground in the place, do? I can't. I'm not the right person to go and tell partners in Germany exactly which clients you're going after or how they're going to win it, etc., etc. Right?
Right.
They're the ones who know that far better than I do. So what do we do as leaders? We set the sort of broad parameters and the frameworks, and you sort of say this is broadly what we want. How we get there, precisely, the routes you go on to get there. That's the thing that you need to work through.
Amazing.
There was a great example given because we use every now and then we work with there's a lady called Elspeth Johnson, and she's been at various. She's an academic sort of business sort of management expert. Sort of she's in the States at the moment, one of the prestigious schools there, and we've used Elspeth quite a lot for different versions of partner training. And at one of our excos, we sort of were using Elspeth to help us with a strategy session. And she gave this Taipei 101 example, which is, and I'd never been to Taiwan. So apparently, I don't know if you, so Taipei 101 is a huge tower block in Taiwan, utterly obvious from everywhere in terms of how you get there. And she and she sort of gave this example of she'd been out with some clients, and they said, "Well, we've got dinner tonight in Taipei 101." And one of the people she was in time before mobile phones and maps and whatever had sort of asked the hotel for a map to get to Taipei 101, and it sort of plotted a route, etc., etc. And her point was, look up, right? Just look up. It's so obvious. You don't need a map with a route to get there because you can see where it is. You know which direction you're going in. That's fine. And that was what we were talking about at our exco, which is you need a clear enough objective that everyone knows how they're getting there. Everyone knows where to get to, but the precise route you take to get there, there's going to be different ones for everyone. I really like that analogy. I thought it was a good thing. That leadership is to set the clear North Star, and then how people get there, they're going to get there in lots of different ways that I can't prescribe, and nor should I.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's so, yeah, choose to eat dinner where it's blindingly obvious about how to get there, or choose a strategy that's so blindingly obvious to everyone that that's something they can navigate towards as
Yeah.
well and find wherever they are in the city. I really like that as well. And back to the Wales example then, and back to the roots and spending time in there with business and the community. Can you tell me a bit about that, about the time away from London, the time away from the office, the time away from kind of mainstream links work, as it were? What do you do that for, and what do you get out of it as a person?
Yeah, so and very much tied to Linklaters actually. So if I give some
Okay.
background, so we do a lot with charity in the UK called Business in the Community. The King's a patron of that charity, and there's a particular sub program of it called the Seeing is Believing program. And what Business in the Community do is they have a place based approach. So what they tend to do is they sort of select disadvantaged areas of the UK, often sort of coastal towns and sort of just other areas that have got very high incidences of deprivation, low social mobility, etc. And they will set up a system whereby you get a combination of businesses, some local, some national, some global, the local political leaders, so council, it always works, it's pretty much essential the council's on board, and just and then a range of sort of people on the ground who are doing good things in terms of trying to change the dynamic on the ground. And so they will pick particular cities or particular parts of cities that they will focus on. And we've been involved as Linklaters with business community for a long time. They've got lots of different strands. So when I came into this role, our head of sustainability, Matt Sparks, brilliant, he'd said to me, look, we're doing some work with business community. We're looking in particular at London. Actually, we're looking at a particular one that never sort of quite got off the ground in London. We said they're doing a visit to Coventry. It'd be good. Why don't do you want to go? A bunch of CEOs and chairs. So doing a Seeing is Believing visit. You get to go and be on the ground in Coventry. I said, yeah, it sounds really interesting, Matt. I sort of, balance what I spend my time on, but okay, it sounds really interesting, willing to go and see it. And didn't really know what I was sort of going for. And then so I went along to Coventry. The visit was led by Zara at Salesforce. So Zara runs Salesforce UK. She's phenomenal. And a guy called Steve Hughes from Coventry Building Society, happened to be Welsh, so I quite like that. He used to run the Principality Building Society, but it focused on a particular area in Coventry called Foles Hill Road. And my mother actually hails from that sort of area, so at least has some vague familial links. And they took us around various different. There was a food bank on Foles Hill Road, a community supermarket food bank. Effectively, there was the Positive Youth Foundation, which was working with young people to try and sort of give them possibilities. And they took us to a few businesses around as well. And then the follow up was, okay, well, what can the businesses that are there do, working with local businesses, a mix of local and national, to help sort of do things in the place that will improve the overall place, and working with the council, having a place plan and so on. So Coventry was the way in for me, and it was a Damascene conversion, right? It was one of those moments where you sort of go, I'm spending my life running this major law firm, thinking about all the things that major law firm leaders think about, and watching some of the other business leaders and the ability, and this is where business is excellent, you can do things very quickly because you've got that. So you've got the ability and the wherewithal just to go, right, there's a problem here, we can provide a solution to that problem, and we can work with so and so and so. We've got the time, treasure, talent. We can provide different bits of each of those, and we can help things happen. So then business community asked me, the first one they ever did in Wales is Newport. I'm from Swansea, so Newport's not my home city, but clearly Wales is Wales. So they said, would you like to lead the visit to Newport? Which I did. And so I ended up then spending most of my time on the BITC front in Newport, rather than Coventry's doing brilliantly, but sort of focused on Newport. And then we focus a lot of the Linklaters efforts around it because we do a huge amount in London. We try and do things in other parts of the country. But in Wales, we focus quite a lot then on Newport and Cardiff. So, for me, I think it's a. I grew up in an environment that was not a privileged environment.
Mhm.
And I thought, I would hark back to my childhood and think, I know what it's like to be in a community that's not the most wealthy community, et cetera, et cetera. And you forget that you've gone through 30 odd years of becoming a different person and living a different life. And then going into Newport and seeing what happens on the ground, seeing what the difference businesses can make, it was a real eye opener, and it was a real grounding thing in terms of you sit here talking about, what pay people get, and do partners get paid this or this, etc. Extraordinary sums, and then you sort of get to go and see what the position is on the ground, and then what you can do to help. So I'm sort of meandering around in terms of the answer. But I will devote some of my time to that. It's with other business leaders, and I find it probably one of the most fulfilling things we can do. I took my exco there last year, so I basically ran a mini visit for my exco. When I asked exco, I said, "Look, we do a lot of good work in Newport. I would love to, at some point during my term doing this role, I would love to have an excom in Newport and." To spend a day literally going and sort of doing the same thing we did, and you can see how we're helping on the ground. And we did that, and I think all the exco members, just found it again really anchoring in terms of, okay, this is what we can do. And those from overseas went back to their own jurisdiction, thinking, okay, is there an equivalent that we can do there? So sorry, so you can see I get very excited about
No,
this
I think
because
it's really important, and you got the opportunity through the podcast, hopefully, to kind of showcase it for other leaders as well. I know that Slaughters have done similarly for Hackney School; they had a very strong relationship with that as well. I like to see law firms tied to their communities and making a big difference there as well. And I thought it was such an interesting move to choose one in a different country, and maybe in a different point in the economic
well,
kind of strata as
and the
well.
challenge with any of it is, there'll be on the one hand, I'm somewhat envious of some of the local employers, and there are brilliant local employers, or the national or global firms who have a local position. They can do things much more easily in some sense, in terms of they can open up job opportunities, etc. There, they're in the community. They can, when one of the centres needs a digger to help dig out the garden, the Celtic Collection, who run one of the finest golf courses in the world and is about 2 miles away, can drive a digger down the road and sort of lend it to them, etc. And so for us, we don't have that. We're in London. We're not in Newport. But we've then done the reverse, right? We've done the sort of children from the various different sites, so from the Newport Yemeni Community Association or children from Kid Care for You. We've had them, we've bussed them up to London. We've given them the sort of this is what the city is. This is what you might do. This is what a lawyer does. This is what a banker does, etc. Just showing a different world. And I think that makes a huge difference. We've also done, and this is one where I'm a trustee of, and Linklaters are involved as well, but I'm sort of trustee personal capacity. So the Social Mobility Business Partnership with Barry Matthews. Barry seems to know everyone. You probably will know Barry, but anyway. But one of the things they do is, and their main thing is, they organise clusters for 16 to 18-year-olds in different cities around the UK, and essentially offer in the holidays, so it shows some dedication for people to sign up to it. A week of where the 16 to 18-year-olds will spend time over the week with normally sort of 2 or 3 different companies. And they will get sort of experience days, and often tied with also a sports organisation, because it's sort of, and that tends to be around resilience and sort of performance and so on. And it gives them again an insight into a world that most of them have got no access to, because that's not what their parents do, that's not what their family friends do, that's not what their friends do. So, and I think that is another. And so they do that in a Newport Cardiff cluster there. So I tend to focus on that, but they do that around the country. I think that's sort of giving people an insight into a world that they don't necessarily know about, but more importantly, they can see people and go, gosh, if I can see someone who's a bit like me doing something like that, then it becomes something that I think I can do, as opposed to it being this far away thing that you think only other type of people get to do that.
You forget how inspirational it is as well. I always see it with Olympians, don't you? Like you see, I think Keely Hodgkins was talking about it recently and just said that she'd seen Jessica Rennis do something in 2012. And I remember 2012 like it's yesterday. But that was the person who inspired her to push on, and now look at her. She's a, gold medalist herself as well. And the other thing that really came back to me then was when we'd done some of those programs, we found that some of the social mobility needs to happen at the parents and teachers level as well. Actually, it's not enough just to bust the kids up, but you've got to get their families to understand, this is what the city looks like. I don't know, does the firm do anything in that area at all? Or
I think the beauty is the local partners we're working with, they will do a lot of that. They will be explaining to the parental groups why this is, and
Right.
often from very different religious backgrounds, etc. as well, so different focus and so on. So they will understand that this is why this will be a good thing for your children to come to. But I was given an example by one of our brilliant trainees, and one of the things I feel somewhat guilty of is Wales should ideally want most of its really good people to stay in Wales and make Wales brilliant, right? If I'm going to be sort of semi-nationalistic about it, and I feel very conflicted sometimes in some of the communities in Wales of, I can very easily, we Linklaters we can bring people to London, we can show them what London is like. And for me, that trend, sort of going from Wales, coming here, building a career, a life, family, etc., that's been life defining for me. But I feel slightly, sort of like, well, it's great to give people those opportunities and people make their choices, but are you taking people away from Wales? And one of our Welsh-speaking trainees, she was telling me that when she was in school, Welsh-speaking school, and she expressed a desire to go to Oxford and then go off and do things in London, that she was almost seen by the teachers as betraying Wales. She was said, well, that's, it's your duty to stay in Wales. You're a Welsh speaker. You should stay in Wales. You shouldn't go to England. You shouldn't do that. And I think sometimes you go, that I can understand where that's coming from, a huge pride in Wales and a huge pride in the language. But again, you sort of go, gosh, if that's the mindset that people are in, how do you give people the opportunity to break out of that if that's what they want?
I mean, literally, the example I'm thinking of is from Hackney, to Osborne Clark, just in London Wall. And you thought, well, if you can't, if you can't get that, it's 140, 150 miles. The example you're talking about, but I'm talking about one that's about 1.5 miles, 2 miles. And
Yeah.
I made a joke with the teacher. Look, we don't put barriers up at the end of Aldersgate Street. It's okay to walk down here and come and
Yeah.
see what we're about as well. So
Yeah, but you see the
interesting.
outside. How do you see the inside? Isn't it?
Agreed.
And then yeah,
Agreed. So we did a walking tour. We did a walking tour of kings and queens of the city.
yeah,
Right. And this guy
excellent.
just took us on this tour and just humanized the city. And I think it's a great way. Americans love that anyway. But if you can ever go on a walking tour of the city and then just chat as you go, I think that kids suddenly get involved and they understand, oh, this is just a place, just streets. So,
Yeah.
I can eat a burger over there or do whatever as well. And it helps a bit as well. Just thinking, maybe wrapping up relatively quickly, but attracting talent. Any thoughts on that? How do you carry on making sure that? And I know you've alluded to the idea of great work earlier on. Anything else that you're doing on the talent front that you're really proud of, or that's going well for you at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm really probably boringly proud of, because I keep referencing it every for the last 2 years or so, and I know some of the people who've been absolutely the spearhead of doing this. So solicitor apprentices, I think we've been running that program now for 2 years. Patrick McCann, who I know sort of definitely.
We all know.
Patrick seems to exactly feature very heavily in your influencer list. So he was fantastic at. He'd wanted to make this happen, I think, with Linklaters for a while. For whatever reason, it sort of hadn't taken off. I got very interested in it, and I knew Patrick had been interested. So when I got this job, I sort of gone to Patrick and said, I'm really keen on doing this. I know A&O are doing it. I think it's a phenomenal thing to do. I don't see why we wouldn't do it. And Patrick's response was, I completely agree with you. I've really wanted to do this for a while. I wasn't sure if there was any appetite. I said, well, look, I'm really keen on it. I'm utterly 100% confident Ademar will be keen on it. And I think we should do it. And Patrick was brilliant, because then he, together with Malcolm Horton internally and with Joe Hughes sort of more broadly, he took it and he delivered it together with Malcolm, and a few partners were involved as well, very quickly for us. Then also set up City Century together with Joe, got a load of other law firms involved. And his point to me was utterly right, was we can take in 6 to 8 a year, and that will add up over years. But we can, if we do it with 50 other law firms, or 100, I suppose, hopefully, but it's about 50 at the moment, then, think about that multiplier effect. And I was, absolutely right, because this is not about any advantage for any one particular law firm. This is about widening the access to the profession as much as you can. And there's no limitation, right, on solicitor apprentices, in terms of we don't put any qualifications on particular background you have to come from, etc. But by definition, because you're coming in age 18, you don't have to go and incur the debt of university, etc. It tends to attract a sort of very socially mobile group of people, and incredibly self-starting with a huge amount of energy. So with second year of that, I'm really proud of it. I think the solicitor apprentices we've had have been superb. They have utterly joined into the life of the firm in a way that I think most people look at and go, oh, you've got so much confidence, and justified confidence. So we had an iftar earlier this week for our Islamic Society, and a number of us sort of attended. And one of the sister apprentices gave a speech at Keith, and was sort of doing the reading, explaining the reading. And you just go, I mean, age, what must Keith, 19, phenomenal, right? Just phenomenally impressive. And you just go, oh, these are a really great bunch of people. So I'm really passionate about that. I think it's a really good, very obvious, definable example of bringing in people from a range of different backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, I had the fortune of working at Burgess Salmon with some of those early day solicitor apprentices as well, India and a few of the others that kind of stick in my mind, as it were, as well. And they were just incredible individuals, incredibly hardworking. When they'd done the day job, they had to go and do the night job on the back end of it as well. I mean, it's not the same experience I would have had at 18, 19 when I was off to university. And I look at them now, and I would not want to be on the other side of something from them if they were arguing a position, because they've got 7 years of work experience by the time that they're qualifying, and they are phenomenal lawyers as well off the back of it. So all power to what you've done, I think, on that as well, and to Patrick.
And lots of, I mean, there's a huge number of firms involved, and they're all doing brilliant work. But I've got a huge, I mean, Patrick and Joe have done a brilliant job. Malcolm, for us internally, has done a brilliant job. And I'm sort of really proud of that. I think that is one where, sort of some of that. And I was, it was so lucky to have people like that who could make it happen, sort of take an idea and make it happen. But that's definitely one I will look back on with a good degree of pride. I think it's a great thing to do. I think it'll be fantastic for law in the city, law more generally. And I won't even get into government changes to solicitor apprentice funding, but anyway.
Paul, listen, thanks so much for joining me for today. I know we've taken lots of your time. I won't take
Oh, it's
any
been a
more
pleasure.
of
It's
it
gone
as well.
really quickly as
Yeah,
well.
flown by.
Yeah.
I wish you well for the future, and I assume that there's another term potentially lying ahead as well in terms of
Oh,
what
I'm
you're
definitely
doing.
not going to comment on that. But Simon, I will say thank you for putting my dogs into your dog Christmas calendar. That was
I wasn't going to talk about
that
it
was
in
the
case you
highlight
didn't.
of their year. So and the
It was
highlight
the
of my
thing that
year.
you said alongside it that really, I think you said it grounds us and really helps the family kind of, spend some time together. I really love that idea of that. It meant a lot to me that you sent that over. If you have listened to today's edition and you've liked what Paul has said, give him a follow on LinkedIn. He's one of the few managing partners out there who's regularly on there. He's not
I've
as
been a bit
regularly as
quiet
some
for
other
a few,
people further up the
yeah.
list, but definitely posting things that are worthwhile engaging with as well. And then give him a follow. And then equally, if you like today's episode, please feel free to share it with others as well. Subscribe to the podcast as well. Paul, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Simon.